to explain the structure and the plane here.
Alrighty.
Dwayne, this is basically based on chance. And what I'm trying to do is avoid too much of my own self-expression. Length of the tape is 60 minutes. The camera will be basically stationary. You, the camera person, will operate the focus and the zoom and the f-stop.
Okay.
The speaker or subject, myself, will hold up and discuss objects for the camera person to focus on. There will be 30 to 50 objects. There will be 50 to 60 statements. Certain statements will be repeated every 12 minutes. Every 12 minutes. I'm figuring the attention span of the viewer to be 12 minutes. So I'll repeat this structure.
So we'll go through
this whole thing every 12 minutes.
Right.
Or I may just go through this first part here.
Right.
And the statements that are chosen will be chosen according to the roll of dice, a pair of dice. If I roll a 2, I will read something from section A in the dictionary. If I roll a 3, I'll read from section B. If I roll a 4, I'll read from C. If I roll a 5, I'll read from D. But if I roll a 6, then I get to read from the whale book. If I roll a 7, I'll read from F in the dictionary. If I roll an 8, I'll read from G. If I roll a 9, I'll read from H. If I roll a 10, I'll read from I, and so on. Read 11 and be from J. But if I roll boxcars, or a 12, then I will read from a pre-written statement. And these statements are numbered, so if I roll a 12, you simply call out a number and then I'll read that statement.
Okay.
That's about it. Okay, and we'll
Right.
each get to our stations.
Okay.
And I want to start with a title. You can focus in on my title here.
Alright.
Now that looks good. We're in my studio here in South Dakota. It's a Friday afternoon, and it's the 15th of May. My camera person is Dwayne Scott, and my name is Don Boyd. The title of this piece is Whale Thoughts. Take that focus a little bit, Dwayne. Okay, that's good. Now we'll just hold it right there, and I've got your credit.
Okay.
Dwayne Scott, that's pronounced. And the date is 1981. Okay, we're ready for our first roll of the dice. You can get back to a little mid shot. And we have a 7. And I'm going to read from section F of the dictionary. This may take me a little longer than a minute to do each one of these.
I thought you might have a tab dictionary. You could just flip right through the page.
Well, I might be able to. Fireball. Something resembling a ball of fire as a kind of lightning. 2. A large bright meteor. 3. A ball containing material to cause an explosion or a fire, formerly used as a weapon thrown in battle. Now I want to show an object here. This is an old aviator's helmet that I used in a piece on a whale I did this winter. And it was called The Birth of a Whale. Yeah, you might want to get that a little bit closer to see what some of those objects are like. It's these wooden pegs here represent the barnacles on the whale, and the dancer that wore it wore this with the mask. So they had the mask here, a ski mask, and this whale helmet. So that's our first object. Second roll of dice. And we got a boxcar. So you give me a number.
17.
Okay. I don't believe in calling other people names. Okay, my second object is a piece that I did January 12th, 1980, and this was done right after a visit with Allison Knowles. And if you can look at this title here, Allison Knowles was reading at the Walker in Minneapolis, and we went out for a beer after the reading. I'll hold it up a little bit here. We went out for a beer, and I asked Allison if I could have the bottle that she drank out of. And then I brought it home and put a stick with it and a few found objects and wrapped it with leather. And inside this bottle is a little feminist calendar that I found and put in there, if that has any significance or not. And there's some beans in here. I don't know if you can focus on that or not, but Allison works with beans a lot. And beans happen to be one of my favorite objects too. Okay, we're ready for another roll of dice. And I have a pen. And that means I read from section I. Now I'm not trying to find a certain word here. I'm just trying to find the section, and wherever it comes out to, I'll read. Incondensable. So I'm really operating a little bit like the found objects. My found objects, I walk down the street, and if there's something there that attracts my attention, like this word incondensable did, then I pick them up. Incondensable. That cannot be condensed. Okay. Another object. This is a bronze hammer that I cast. And you can see it has a sheep motif on it. Cast this in about 1976. Now you might want to show the other. Let me just turn the other end of the hammer. And you can see that it's got a screw-on head here. Okay. I have an 8. That means I read from section G. So these words are operating very much like my found objects.
When you pick a found object, is it something that strikes you aesthetically, or just triggers some emotion?
Yeah, it just triggers something, and I think it's mostly emotion. It's a mixture, but I guess that's what aesthetics are too. They do something to you, stop your attention. Gary. Spear of battle. It's got a capital G-A-R-Y. To be bold. To conquer, a masculine name. A city in northwestern Indiana on Lake Michigan. Population 132,000. see, I need another object. Okay, I want to show, this is a book I did in the spring of 1980 after I had seen the Boyce show at the Guggenheim in November. And it was featured in my show at Kenyon. And it was written up in a column by Ken Friedman for his arts directory. Now I want to show the inside of this. Inside there are rubber stampings and found objects sewn with leather. Now I mean to further elaborate on this. I don't know if we can show both of those. Why don't you just show a found object? Here's what I mean by a found object. It's a tin can that's been run over and it caught my eye. I walk back and forth to work every day. So that's... Okay, we have 4, and I read from section C. Why don't you find one of those articles there that Ken wrote? Maybe we can show that as one of my objects.
Okay.
I think they're in the that section. Kabbalah, Hebrew, received lore, mysterious doctrine, to receive or take, an occult religious philosophy developed by certain Jewish rabbis, based on a mystical interpretation of the scriptures. Okay, we want to pass over. That'll be my next object. This is the article that Ken wrote, and it was in the National Arts Guide. And it shows some of my found objects. And then on the back, it's the Boyce and Boyd book. And the column was entitled Happenings. And this was in the March-April 1980 issue. It's too bad that National Arts Guide has gone defunct now. That is a fine magazine. I have a 9, and I have to read from section H. Hotchpot. Walloon hosepot, a kind of stew, a stew of beef or mutton. Hodgepodge. In English law, a pooling of property for equal distribution. Okay, another object. This is from a series that I did near the end of this year. It's dark. I don't know if it'll show up, but you can see a found object here on the front. And then the leather is a dark brown. I work the leather wet, and about all I do to it is punch it or sew it, and there may be some stampings on the back. You might want to look at this back. And these are meant to be handled, and they could be hung on the wall. How are we doing on the time?
It's been about, I was going to say, it's about the 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay, time to reread our statement. Okay.
Do you want me to...
This is, I'll just restate what we did at first. This is a piece entitled Whale Thoughts by Don Boyd. And I'm operating under a chance system, so that every time I roll the dice, I select a reading from the dictionary on numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5. If I roll a 6, I read from a whale book, and I haven't read I just now rolled a 6. And if I roll a 12, I read from one of my own quotes. And items, if I roll 7, 8, 9, or 10, or 11, I read from the dictionary. And each one of those numbers has an assigned letter. Okay, I rolled a 6, so I'm going to read from my whale book. I do have several readings tabbed. And this book is Mind in the Waters by Joan McIntyre. I want to turn that down just a little bit. That background music is from my dance piece, The Birth of a Whale. I want to show this page that I'm reading from. It's a very interesting condensation of whale ideas. It shows it. This is a block print of a whale and then a little writing underneath it. I want to read about a humpback whale. The humpback whale is the only member of the genus Megaptera, and it differs markedly from other rorquals. The humpback is black on top rather than blue or blue-gray, with a white throat and belly. Irregular knobs and protuberances appear on its head and flippers. It is frequently covered with whale lice and barnacles. The humpback's outstanding feature is a long flipper with irregular edges. This stocky whale averages about 40 feet, 12.5 meters in length. It is known for its beautiful songs that may continue for 3 to 4 hours. The humpback winters in tropical waters near islands or the coast, and summers in temperate and subpolar waters. There are two major populations, one in the northern hemisphere and one in the southern. They are not known to mix. So it's time for another roll of our dice. And I rolled a 7, which means I read from section F. Forsworn, the past participle of forswear, having sworn falsely or perjured. Okay, another object. This is a smaller piece. You may want to get in closer for this thing. Excuse me. Boyd's. No, she's judging in Huron today. Late tomorrow afternoon. Right. All right. Bye. Okay, here's that piece. Now the white spot is for any marking that I want to make on it, although I do have some things here on this inside flap, my signature and the date, and there are little pins in it you can see, and this is a piece of wood, kind of a burl, that's wrapped. Okay, we rolled a 5. I'll read from section D. The displaced person. A person left homeless in a foreign country as a result of war. Abbreviated capital D, capital P. Now, another object. I want to show one of my notebooks. This is an oil painting of myself. Now I've been doing this a long time. I started out in art, in advertising, as an illustrator, graphic designer, and I was a painter. And did that for a long time, but when I turned to the fine arts, I just used my painting very sparingly. I've never had an exhibit. Well, I had one exhibit of paintings. Make that 2. Back in 1958, 57, 58. But I just make these notebooks, paint on them, and then I jot down various notes about what I want to do, my plans. Okay. Next roll of the dice, and I've rolled a 7. And I read from section F. Fear. A sudden attack akin to OHG, ambush. And this is the root meaning of the word, F-A-R-E. Or F-A-H-R. Danger, peril, basic sense, trap, to test, entice, an element in experimentum, a feeling of anxiety and agitation caused by the presence or nearness of danger, evil, pain, and so forth, timidity, dread, terror, fright, apprehension. 2. Respectful dread, awe, reverence. 3. A feeling of uneasiness, disquiet. 4. A cause for fear. Possibility, chance, as there was no fear of difficulty. To be afraid of, dread, to feel reverence or awe for, to expect with misgiving. Fear, to be afraid, to be uneasy, anxious, or doubtful, in order to avoid or prevent. Fear is the general term for the anxiety and agitation felt at the presence of danger. Dread refers to the fear or depression felt in anticipating something dangerous or disagreeable. To live in dread of poverty. Fright applies to a sudden, shocking, usually momentary fear. A mouse gave her a fright. Alarm implies the fright felt at the sudden realization of danger. He felt alarm at the sight of the pistol. Dismay implies a loss of courage or a feeling of consternation at the prospect of trouble or danger. Terror applies to an overwhelming, often paralyzing fear, the terror of soldiers in combat. Panic refers to a frantic, unreasoning fear, often one that spreads quickly and leads to irrational, aimless action, such as the cry of fire created a panic. Did I show an object for that one?
No.
I did not. Okay, I think I'll show one of these larger pieces here. You may have to draw back a little bit more. This is hold. That isn't working too well. I like that, maybe. We can zoom in on some details. This is a piece I did for an exhibit I had at the Community Cultural Center last November. That would be 1980. And I wanted to do one of these every day for a month. And I did quite a few. I did about 20 of them. And the basic idea was just to take a simple structural form that I had arrived at and do different variations on it. And I'll be showing quite a few of these. Leather is stretched over it wet, fastened with pins. Various stampings are made on the leather, and the wood is fairly simple wood, pound wood that I have in my backyard. And I do all the carving on a saw, so it's not very, doesn't take me very long to do one of those. Roll a 7, so we read from F, and that's where I have been reading. Fault finder. A person given to finding fault, chronic, captious complainer.
Time's up for
Another announcement?
yeah.
Okay. Right, this tape is entitled Whale Thoughts. I'm Don Boyd. Camera person is Dwayne Scott. We're doing this in my studio in South Dakota. Every 12 minutes we retell you what we're doing. The structure is to roll the dice. If the dice come up on any number between 2 and 5, I read from the dictionary. If I roll a 6, I read from a whale book. Any number between 7 and 11, I read from the dictionary. And if I roll a 12, I read from some of my own writings that are numbered. And Dwayne will give me the number to read from. So far I've read one whale thought and one of my own. So this is 8, and I'm to read from section G of the dictionary. Grandeur. Greatness of position and eminence. Splendor, magnificence. Moral and intellectual greatness. Nobility, dignity. I'll show another one of these pieces I did for the Community Cultural Center in 1980. And I've had people say that these pieces remind them of various other types of art. And this is a found object right here. Might want to focus in on that, Dwayne. A piece of copper I found on my way to work one morning. And it's pegged with some little twigs I cut off my tree in the backyard, maple tree. This one is made out of balsa wood. It's very thin and very light. And the pinning of the leather is done with some colored toothpicks. My son had been making a project, and I saw these things, and the balsa was so thin and easily punctured that I just drove the toothpicks right through the leather. So this whole thing is very light. I rolled a 5. I read from section D. Deride. Giving bad sense. To laugh. To laugh at in contempt or scorn, make fun of, ridicule. See ridicule. Okay.
An object.
We need another object. Okay, here's a piece that I've just had laying around here. This is a piece of soapstone that I polished in 1976, and you can see from the side it's very thin. It's kind of greenish. And the profile is of a very, might want to back away a little bit. There you are. Sort of like a flying bean. But I propose to use that on a sculpture someday. I just make these components and then have them laying around here until I may want to use them. I rolled an 8, which means to read from section G. Grope. A grasp. To feel or search about blindly, hesitantly, or uncertainly, feel one's way. To seek or find by groping one's way. Another object. We have another one of these sculptures. I think I've been showing them to you almost in order of, well, this may have been the first one. This is balsa, and it isn't double level like the other two. You might want to focus in on this section here. This I use brass and copper and leather and items that I think are going to change with age. And so a lot of the things that I'm working with, I'm anticipating something happening to them, some kind of process. I think by handling them over the years, they will get an additional patina. But I started to say something that people read things into my works that I don't normally see or I don't intend. And one thing that I don't intend that has been read into them is that they are like Native American works. Now I do admire Native American work, but I think that if I just simply tried to copy Native American work, I would not have a valid art form. Okay, I rolled a 6. That means another reading from the Whale Book. This is a rather long poem by Pablo Neruda entitled Leviathan. Ark on the waters, fury at peace with itself, derelict. Night of the brute, Antarctic outlander, nearing and passing me, an ice field, displacing in darkness one day. I shall enter your walls, I shall savage the sunken marine of your winter, your armory. You may want to just roam around and look at some of these objects in the room during.
Okay.
Southward there crackled a holocaust, black with your planet's expulsion, the domains of your silence that moved in the alga and jostled the densities. You might want to take the camera and pan around on some of these different objects.
All right.
The form, then, form was alone, magnitudes, sealed by a world's agitation, wherein glided your leathern preeminence, mistrusting the gifts of its nature, tenderness, power. Arc of our passion striking fire in the blackening snow, as with torches. When your blind blood was quickened, an epic of ocean still slept in its gardens. And in an immensity, the disfiguring moon divided its track like a magnet of phosphor. Life sputtered, the mother Medusa blew in the flame, a tempest of multiple wombs. And increase grew whole in its purity, a pompano's pulse in the sea. Among waters, your congress of mastheads and spars was disposed like maternity's motion in blood, and your power of inviolate night was shed on the roots in a deluge. Past expectancy's islands, your continent fled. Dereliction and terror made the loneliness tremble. Even so, terror mounted the globes of the glacial moon. Terror entered your flesh and struck at your solitude. The asylums of dread where your lamp lay extinguished. With you was the night, a tempestuous slime that held you like pitch and enveloped you while your tail's hurricano spun the ice of a slumbering galaxy. O enormously wounded one, fiery fountainhead, lashing a ruin of thunders on the harpoon's periphery, stained in the bloodbath, bleeding all virtue away. The repose and the calm of the animal conduct you, a cyclone of fracturing crescents through the black boats of blubber, and the creatures of rancor and plague. Great mold among crystals dead, on a pole of the moon. Heaven itself is encompassed, pandemonium's cloud that laments there, and covers all ocean with blood. Okay, I want to show another object that's been setting here. This piece was done in 1969. I don't know if you can see this top. Maybe you can get in on this top here. But this was a proposal for a monumental piece in steel. And I was interested in this piece being constructed like an airplane skeleton. And that would make it very lightweight. And this would be approximately 20 feet high. This hole, the top of this piece. But I left this work in about 1973 to experiment with leather, and I've been working with leather since that time. Okay, we have an 11, and I read from section J. Jute. From matted hair and braid of hair, fibrous roots. A strong, glossy fiber used for making burlap, sacks, mats, rope, either of 2 East Indian plants from which this fiber is obtained. Okay, I have another object to show. This is another one in the series from the spring, and you can see a piece of copper on it and a few punctures in the leather. I rolled a 4. And I read from section C. Let me know if we come up to that next time.
Right.
Culm, C-U-L-M, blade of grass. The jointed stem of various grasses, usually hollow, to grow or develop into a culm, C-U-L-M. Okay. Show another piece. This is a flat piece made of a sheep leather and a found piece of fur that I found during one of our hobo days here in South Dakota. One of the biggest events is a hobo day, and I think somebody was wearing a raccoon coat or a rabbit, can't tell what it is, and they dropped this off. It was rainy that day, and I picked it up. Might want to come in close on that. Now, some of these pieces I mail to Ken Friedman, and he collaborates with me by drawing on them, so you might notice broad expanse of space on some of this. I rolled a 4. I read from section C. Cuneiform. Wedge-shaped, said especially of the characters used in ancient Akkadian, Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian inscriptions, or the inscriptions themselves, cuneiform characters or inscriptions.
Can I pick an object?
Sure. There's one you want to see? Okay. This is a wooden shoe form that a friend gave to me from Gambier, Ohio, and asked me to do something with it. And I drove some nails in it. And you can see the shoe shape. And I wrapped it with leather. Of course, the only way to really see these is to really be able to hold them. I rolled a 5. I read from section D. We should be getting about time for another.
Yeah, we are. Actually, we were a couple minutes ago.
Okay. Drought. Dryness, dry ground, absence of moisture, especially of rain, prolonged dry weather, archaic thirst. Okay, this video piece is entitled Whale Thoughts by Don Boyd. It's being done in Brookings, South Dakota, May 15th, 1981. The camera person is Dwayne Scott.
Should keep saying that.
The program is to roll a dice, and each roll of the dice there's a predetermined reading structure. If I roll the numbers 2 to 5, I read from the dictionary. If I roll a 6, I read from a whale book. Numbers 7 to 11, I read from the dictionary. And if I roll a 12, I read from one of my own writings. And every time I read, I show an object. And we have a 9. That is section H. Hawksbill. A small turtle found in tropical seas having a hawk-like beak and a horny shell from which tortoise shell is obtained, also called hawksbill turtle. Now, in choosing these readings, I don't have the dictionary marked or anything. I just simply, as quickly as I can, try to come up with a reading. Well, there's quite a few objects I have here that I'd like to show. Okay. You want to get me that sheep there, Dwayne? Yeah. I grew up on a sheep farm in Knox County, Ohio. And this is a sheep that I did in, it must have been last spring of 1980. And it's made of found objects. You can see a paper mailing tube here. That was a tube that was mailed to us with some allergen for my son in it. And it's a piece of copper. And the, there's some twigs. The board was found in the backyard. But I want to read from the side of this sheep. There's an inscription that I copied from my journal that I wrote when I was 14 years old. I wrote this when I was 14, but it says, "When I was 9, Daddy bought me an orphaned lamb for $1. Written in 1948. Okay, I rolled a 9, and I read from section H. Hydrated, formed by chemical combination with water. Want to give me that soap carving there? Yeah, let's take the cover off. This is a soap carving I picked up at an antique shop in South Dakota. There's not much detail to it, but it's a dog. Bought it for $1. It's probably 30, 40 years old. Okay, we have a boxcar. That means, Dwayne, that you tell me what to read. Call out a number.
23.
23. Don't drink coffee. Okay, we have well, I found that to be fairly true for myself. All right, here is an object. This studio that we're in is my private room, and in it I secrete all the favorite objects, most of my favorite objects that I have. And this is a piece of ceramics that my youngest son, Jonathan, made for me. And I notice he has some copper in it. There's a little piece of copper wire, and there's his signature and the date. And it really, I think, is supposed to have been a wind chimes or something. There's holes in them. This is a little cube of clay, and there's a little bit of glaze on it. I rolled an 8, and that is to read from G. Grimes Golden, short for Grimes Golden Pippin, variety grown around 1790 by T.P. Grimes, West Virginia fruit grower. An autumn eating apple with a yellow skin, often called a Grimes. Okay, I need another object. Got another.
That one.
Okay, we might have to take that off the wall.
Okay.
This is a fairly significant piece. I'm glad you chose it and I didn't. It's this is the first piece of work I did after my father died in March of 1980. And whenever I do a piece, I don't try to consciously say, well, I'm going to do a piece in memory of my father, or I'm going to do anything. I just simply try to begin working. And a lot of times it's quite difficult because there are problems going on all the time. And I just noticed that in my journals that looking back a year later, this was the first piece I had done. And I made a copy of this, a second version, and sent it to Ronald Feldman about 6 months later, and I noticed that that was what was significant about it. Okay, I have rolled another boxcar.
Okay. 43.
43. Now this section of reading are a series of statements that I had made between the years of 1960 and 1968. Why are there so many Pharisees and so few publicans? Okay, we need another object. Oh, here's an object I'm going to show. This is it's called a cowboy fork. And there's a clip, maybe you can see that here, on the back, and you clipped it onto your plate. And it didn't get lost when you're walking from the campfire over to sit down.
Where'd you get that?
Picked that up in South Dakota. It has a real bone handle on it and old steel. I rolled an 8, and I read from section G. I'm getting a lot from G here. A grass snake. Any of various small, non-poisonous snakes that live in swamps and marshes. And I wanted to show another object here that I'll gather up some of these objects. This is an Indian beaded bottle that I picked up here in Brookings at an auction. And this is not porcupine quills, which were earlier, but this is little trade beads. that they just bought, traded, and it's just a glass bottle covered with these. Bottom's covered. And I rolled a 4. I read from section C. Cusco, a city in south-central Peru, former capital of the Inca Empire, also spelled capital C-U-Z-C-O. Oh, I have to show an object for that. Here is a pipestone turtle. This is done by a contemporary Native American that works in Pipestone, about 25 miles east of Brookings here. It's right over the border, South Dakota border in Minnesota. And these Indians make these turtles for the tourist trade from a very sacred red stone called pipestone.
It's time to do credits.
Okay. This is Whale Thoughts, a videotape made in the studio of Don Boyd in Brookings, South Dakota on May 15th, 1981. Every 12 minutes we give a new credit. The structure of the tape is that I roll the dice. If I roll a number, combination of numbers from 2 to 5, I read from the dictionary. If I roll a 6, I read from a book on whales. If I roll a number between 7 and 11, I read from the dictionary. And if I roll a 12, I read from my own writings. I rolled a snake eyes, and that's an A. I think that's the first one today. Admissive. Admitting or tending to admit. Now when I look at the dictionary, I don't try to find a really good word. I try to pick the first word that really strikes me in some way. Okay, for another object, I have here a piece that I picked up in Europe when I traveled there in 1958. It's a wine. It has a cork. And it's a wine stopper in it, and the mouth opens. Okay, I rolled an 11, and I read from section J. Jerky. Characterized by jerks, making sudden starts and stops, making convulsive or spasmodic movements. Okay, now another object. We have, let's see. Well, I have a bottle of stones here that my children bring to me, and I just put them in these glass jars. Reminds me of George Machunas. He used to preserve stones and various products of geographical areas, and then if he wanted to make a piece, he would use these stones or objects from the geographical areas. So he could make a South Dakota piece if he had one of these stones. And he had, maybe 10 or 15 objects from each state, and some sand and dirt, and I remember he collected feces from various animals. He wanted me to send him some coyote feces, but I didn't know what they were like. I rolled a 7, and I'm to read from section F. Well, here's a good word, fruitcake. A rich cake containing nuts, preserved fruit, citrons, spices, and so forth. And I need to show an object for that. I like this piece here. This is a tin box I bought on a garage sale. We have an awful lot of those out here. It's an old Rexall pillbox. But inside are all kinds of sewing products. Like here's a set of cufflinks. China. And little hooks and buttons. A little hook. And I'm just keeping it just the way I bought it. Piece of pink thread here. I rolled a 4. I read from section C. Canker. A venereal sore or ulcer, a primary lesion of syphilis. I didn't know that. I used to have canker sores all the time. We just called any sore on the mouth a canker sore. Well, they pronounce it chancre. So we probably were mispronouncing it too.
I've always pronounced it canker.
Mm-hmm. And it's supposed to be pronounced chancre. C-H-A-N-C-R-E. The next word is chancroid.